The final installment of our Sports Washing Meets World Cup series is here, and in this video we will be looking back at the waves of controversy that surrounded the Qatar 2022 World Cup. A World Cup that may well be seen as the most successful sports washing project of all time. For tournament organisers, a 3-3 final between France and Argentina with Lionel Messi finally lifting the World Cup was the stuff of dreams, the ultimate fairy tale. The final would be the best remembered game of a generation, and the image of Messi lifting the famous trophy in Qatar will long outlive the memories of the accusations that surrounded the tournament. The general idea is that in hosting the World Cup, the Qatari government was able to shift the focus onto the positive aspects of the country and its progress, while downplaying the negative aspects such as the exploitation of migrant workers. In truth, there are various different reasons why Qatar winning the bid to host the 2022 World Cup didn't make sense, and indeed seemed both unjustified and suspicious. The decision was met with widespread criticism from the very beginning. It has to be mentioned that the following allegations that we will discuss have not been proven. Qatar has consistently denied many claims, and FIFA too has always defended the integrity of their World Cup bidding process. The allegations of manipulation continue to cast a shadow over the Qatar World Cup, but it has been difficult to prove many of the suspicions that have made this perhaps the most controversial World Cup of all time. One of the more simple reasons for the controversy was actually the size of the country, and therefore the logistical difficulties of hosting such a tournament. Qatar is a tiny country with a population of just over 2 million people, and hosting a World Cup would require a massive investment in infrastructure, including new stadiums, hotels, and transportation systems. The investment thereafter in infrastructure and facilities for the World Cup allowed the Qatari government to present itself as a modern and progressive country, despite the fact that it is an absolute monarchy with strict censorship laws and restrictions on freedom of speech and assembly. So Qatar looked to have met the tournament hosting requirements with flying colours when it hit our television screens in November 22, with sparkling stadiums and blinding lights. But how it went from having very little infrastructure to having everything in place poses other deeper and darker questions, involving the rights of the workers who built that very infrastructure that made the tournament possible. The human rights record of the Qatari government has been a major source of controversy. There were widespread concerns about the treatment of migrant workers in the country, who make up the majority of the workforce and are often subject to terrible working conditions and exploitation. Many migrant workers who came from countries such as Nepal, India and Bangladesh are promised good wages and working conditions, but when they arrive in Qatar, they are subject to a horrible reality that doesn't meet those promises, and there have also been reports of workers being denied access to medical care. These droves of immigrant workers multiplied with the Gulf nation's quest to successfully prepare and host the biggest show on earth. But despite the monumental financial power that Qatar holds, it seemingly wasn't even able to fairly pay or look after its growing workforce. According to reports from human rights organisations and media outlets, workers also faced hazardous working conditions, long hours and inadequate living conditions, which contributed to a high number of deaths. The reported deaths of many workers has surely been the darkest cloud cast over the Qatar World Cup. It goes without saying that this should never come to pass. With this in mind, many thought that Qatar should never be a host for a World Cup. It may also be the very reason why Qatar wanted to host the World Cup, with the idea of sports washing being to portray a positive image in the spotlight of the world, leaving the bad bits hidden in the shadows. The Qatari government has faced widespread criticism over the deaths, and has been accused of turning a blind eye to the exploitation of migrant workers. Despite some efforts to improve working conditions, including the introduction of a new labour law and the establishment of a complaints mechanism, many human rights organisations say that much more needs to be done to ensure the safety and well-being of workers in the country. Qatar argues that the legacy of the World Cup will be to inspire the Arab world with football, and that they have learnt lessons and intend to improve their rights and conditions for workers moving forward. In addition to the exploitation of migrant workers, there were also concerns about the treatment of women and the LGBTQ community. Women face significant discrimination and repression in the conservative and heavily censored state, and the LGBTQ community is effectively outlawed, with homosexuality being illegal and punishable by imprisonment. There were concerns that the World Cup would be used as a platform to promote these discriminatory policies, and that fans and players would be at risk during the tournament. As with the other sports washing tournaments we have mentioned, from all the way back in Italy in 1934 right up to Russia in 2018, a common theme has been accusations of bribery in order to host the tournament, none more so than with Qatar 2022. A Netflix documentary was released just before the tournament began in late 2022. It went into great detail of how Qatar had masterminded their winning bid and the tricks of the trade they used to win votes. One particular story even suggests that the Qatari bid to own PSG Football Club in France was part of a deal brokered by the Gulf state to win over European votes for the 2022 bid. Michel Platini was the head of UEFA, the European football governing body that formed a key block of significant votes for a World Cup bid. Allegedly, Platini and even the President of France were involved in talks that concluded with Qatar earning more votes and Paris being the home of their new superpower football club. Trade deals between the nations were even said to form a part of this lucrative pact. It has also been claimed that members of the Qatari bid committee offered gifts and made payments to FIFA executives in exchange for their vote. Namely, the former FIFA Vice President, Jack Warner, was accused of accepting a $1.2 million payment from a Qatari company just days before the vote. He has denied the allegations. The Netflix series is made up of many fascinating anecdotes like this one, which showed Qatar in a particularly bad light and heavily suggested that they had bought the World Cup and, as alleged, were guilty of human rights abuses, corruption, and a lot of sports washing. FIFA executives were reportedly linked to Qatari companies or held positions in Qatari-linked organisations. For example, FIFA Executive Committee member Mohammed bin Hammam was accused of having close ties to the Qatari bid and using his position to influence the vote in its favour. Similarly, there have also been suggestions that the Qatari bidding team used its wealth and political influence to actively intimidate voters and sway them in its favour. Some reports have suggested that the Qatari government used its diplomatic and economic power to influence FIFA officials and secure the votes. The extreme heat in Qatar, particularly during the summer months when temperatures can reach as high as 50 degrees Celsius, was another reason why it might not have been a great World Cup host. Regarding the safety and well-being of players, fans and workers, many people called for the tournament to be moved to a cooler time of the year or a different location altogether. FIFA ultimately agreed to move the tournament to the winter months to mitigate the effects of the heat. But this has caused a number of scheduling problems for domestic leagues and led to a number of high-profile players and managers calling for the tournament to be moved back to the summer. It would suggest that other factors may have been more important to FIFA when they awarded Qatar the tournament, to the extent that they didn't even think about the burning heat or what time of year they might play the games. What do you think? There are a plethora of reasons why awarding Qatar the World Cup perhaps wasn't the best idea, but many of them are disputed by FIFA and by Qatar, and some of the reasons are unproven. What is certain is that there was also a plethora of magical football moments in Qatar that in the end helped the tournament to shine. Our whole series on sports washing has outlined how the unbridled global passion for football is the perfect potion for a state looking to make international headway, and this was multiplied in Doha with the magic of Messi, creating memories that will last forever as some of the most inspiring in football history. Despite the concerns and criticism, Qatar broke viewership records. Many had a great time visiting Qatar, and the stadiums looked magnificent and the infrastructure efficient. But at what cost did all of this prevail? The tournament was shrouded in more controversy than that of some dictatorships, which is really saying something. Overall, the argument is that the World Cup allowed Qatar to use this positive image associated with sports to improve its reputation on the world stage and distract from the country's controversial political issues. It seems fairly obvious that this might be the case. What do you believe? FIFA has undergone many changes since Qatar was awarded the World Cup, but they remain an institution under fierce scrutiny, just like the state of Qatar. And watch out for Saudi Arabia, who seem to be coming up with a similarly cunning plan to elevate themselves to global status using football. Cristiano Ronaldo has just moved there to ply his trade, and the nation is tipped to host a World Cup in the coming years. There have only ever been 22 World Cups, and we have looked at 4 of them in great detail. We also looked at the Brazil national team of the 1970s and how they were taken over in every sense of the phrase by the military dictatorship of the time. FIFA have been a constant across all of these World Cups. Many will argue that football has evolved and the faces of the institutions have changed, but certain controversial patterns and allegations have been popping up now across a century. We hope for the sake of football and for people in general that everything we have seen hasn't been quite as hideous as it may have appeared. But we fear that this is impossible, given the severity and multitude of the claims. Let's just hope for a clean and bright future for the game of football, and that our sport, the beautiful game, is used in a positive way to better the lives of people and populations across the globe, as it should be.